Hi everybody, I am Kaili Ets. Welcome to the Baby Red Flags and Root Causes workshop. I hope that this workshop will leave you with an understanding of your baby on a whole new level. Here's just the agenda that we're going to cover today. So we're going to look at what are red flags. We're going to go through some of the root causes that those red flags might be indicating. I'm going to share a little bit about how to work with me a little bit further, and then we'll finish off with our Q&A. Before we jump in, I want to tell you a little bit about one of my clients, Nicole. So Nicole was a first-time mom, just like many of you. She was completely exhausted and overwhelmed. Her baby was constantly fussy, had difficulty feeding, had reflux, and would only sleep when held. Nicole felt like she was failing as a mom and was just desperate for answers. After one particularly rough night, after many wake-ups, I bet some of you can relate to that, Nicole had hit her breaking point and she just couldn't keep going on this way, and she knew that she needed to find some help. And a friend of hers who had been through something similar suggested that she reach out to me. So Nicole got in touch and we started working together. First, we started working in person with some infant craniosacral therapy sessions and really supporting the reflux and the feeding there. And then we worked virtually for a little bit more of the sleep support. And we really took a close look at her baby's behavior, identified several red flags like her constant reflux, her difficulty feeding. I assessed her body, including her mouth and her tongue function, and discovered that this baby actually had quite a restricted tongue function, which could be due to a tongue tie, but she also had significant body tightness from her birth. And we worked together to address these with the body work, with the infant craniosacral therapy. We also adjusted some feeding positions. We looked specifically at some of the causes of the reflux, and then we also helped to optimize sleep and really embracing things that were working with sleep and changing the things that were not working anymore. And in just a few weeks, Nicole saw some pretty amazing results and improvements, and her baby started to relax more, was more comfortable feeding as a result of that. The reflux decreased, and she began sleeping in longer stretches, which was very exciting. And then Nicole just felt like a whole new person. She had more confidence as a mom. She was no longer totally exhausted and just trying to survive, but was now really starting to enjoy her baby a little bit more. And really this story, I share it because it's so powerful and it shows how important it is to really start looking at the symptoms and finding the root cause of the symptoms rather than just trying to put band-aid solutions on these symptoms to really help our baby's discomfort, their fussiness, their feeding difficulties, whatever it is that they may be presenting with. Finding the root cause is so important. And that is exactly why I am so passionate about helping other moms just like you to get to that same place. Now, I just want to quickly introduce myself. Some of you may already know me through my email list, or perhaps you have attended some of my classes in the past, but many of you are new to me as well. So I'm Kaili Ets. Hi, nice to meet you. I have been a pediatric occupational therapist for the last 16 years. I have worked both in Canada and also in the US. I am also an infant craniosacral therapist, and I have various certifications in baby-related things like holistic sleep, reflux, tongue ties, and so much more. I'm also a mom of two, and I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I have an almost 9-year-old son. I love babies and young children, and I have basically known my entire life that I wanted to be a mom since my sister was born when I was 6. I have a love of learning, and I'm also constantly seeking out more and more knowledge and training related specifically to babies and toddlers. And this is why I am known for handling the more complex cases and really diving deep into the root cause when I support my clients. So whether it's body tightness, body compression or tension, reflux, tongue dysfunction, maybe due to a tongue tie, sensory processing differences, non-integrated primitive reflexes, or perhaps something like low vagal tone. And if you don't know what some of those words mean, not a problem. We're going to go through some of those today as well so that you will start to understand a little bit more. I'm really here to simplify your search, to answer your questions, and to take you on a journey to understanding your baby and child on a whole new level to help you both thrive. So let's start discussing some red flags. So what are red flags and why are they important? Red flags I like to think of as symptoms or signs that you might be seeing in your baby or sometimes in yourself that may indicate developmental or health concerns for your baby. So early recognition of these signs is really important because it will help to start addressing those root causes and those issues before they become even bigger problems, but really it's never too late. Common red flags include things like sleep disturbances, feeding issues, reflux, body tightness, also, nipple pain, those kinds of things, right? Mouth breathing, snoring. If your baby is really fussing all day and you just can't figure out why. If they go from 0 to 60, they have difficulty calming. All of those are really signs that there's something going on with your baby. So if they're waking every hour throughout the night, even after the newborn period, if they're pulling on and off the nipple, if they're arching their back, if nursing is painful for you, like I mentioned, that was totally my case. Maybe your baby has a weird crawl. All of those things indicate that there's something else, something that is causing that, right? So my story is maybe one that you're also potentially familiar with. I didn't realize about red flags and like signs and symptoms to look for until my baby was about 9 months old. This is my firstborn here, Christian. And I had a lot of training on infant and child development in my OT career up until that point. So 8.5 years ago, when my first was born, I really felt like I was desperately juggling all the parts of motherhood, trying to keep everything in the air. I was so excited to finally have my baby in my arms, and I was looking forward to motherhood. I wanted it to be easy and joyful. I had so much experience with babies and kids, and I thought it was going to be like a walk in the park. I was definitely not ready for how hard it really was. Figuring out how to breastfeed my son, who had a shallow latch and kept popping on and off. He didn't sleep well. I was also recovering from a C-section. I was absolutely exhausted, and the whole thing was just so stressful. My son, Christian, was a classic 20 to 30-minute napper, mainly on me or moving, and I knew something was going on with my baby. I Googled a lot. Breastfeeding hurt, and he seemed to feed every hour. I visited lactation consultants. I went to breastfeeding circles. I talked to other moms. I asked my midwives, my doctors, so many things, mother-in-laws. I was searching for answers and advice, like just something to help me figure out what was going on with my baby. What I got was a lot of conflicting advice, which most of the time just didn't seem to click with me. And I just had this sense that I couldn't figure out what was going on with my baby, and nobody seemed to be helping me do that. And as a result, I felt like I was majorly failing at motherhood. So I began doing a lot of reading of books, taking online courses, various certifications. As you can see, my son has been a very good teacher to me. And then finally things started to click into place, and I started getting body work from my baby. I became aware of the various red flags like the reflux, not loving tummy time. He didn't even really like baby wearing in the first few months. And of course, all of the wakings, right? I started worrying less about doing and focused more on being with my baby and tuning into my baby and focusing on what was working and what wasn't working and kind of embracing those things that were working for us regardless of what social media was telling me. And this being really allowed me to realize and kind of release the pressure that I was holding, release the worry, stop a little bit of that stress, and just even get rid of some of that guilt that I was somehow doing things wrong. And that felt really liberating. And I finally felt like I could start to tune into and trust my intuition and tune out the noise. And so I really started to feel more confident in my decisions and my ability to do motherhood more sort of my way. And now I'm on a mission to help you feel the same. We chatted just briefly a little bit about those red flags. I want to now dive into more of the root causes of the red flags. And I go through long checklists of the specific red flags to look for and the signs and symptoms for each of these root causes inside my What's Wrong with Your Baby ebook. But for now, we're just going to go through the root causes. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about them. I'll give you a few of the signs and symptoms to look out for, and then also just some ideas of what you can do in at home. Just some like little tips to kind of get started with. So the first one is feeding issues and oral ties. So this could look like shallow latch, frequent spit up, or fussiness during feeds, oral ties like tongue ties, lip ties, cheek ties, sometimes called buccal ties. These can all have a significant impact on feeding, both at the breast and at the bottle, as well as ability to manage solids later, and specifically oral ties can also affect speech later on as well. And sometimes they can affect sleeping and airway kind of patency as well. So it's an important thing to rule out if your baby does have feeding difficulties. Feeding difficulties are often a big cause of reflux also, just because of the increased air intake that comes in when your baby has a shallow latch or is constantly popping on and off the breast, or their tongue isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing and there's a lot of air coming in along with the milk. So some of the signs that you might look for besides like the shallow latch, the frequent spit up, the fussiness during feeds would be things like clicking noises while they're feeding. Sometimes they get bubbles by their mouth when they're feeding. Prolonged feeding times. So if feeding is taking a really long time, and or if your baby is falling asleep during feeds and you know that it's not like sleep time, that's also potentially a sign that there's some inefficiency going on with their ability to feed properly. And then of course, poor weight gain as well. However, I want to just advise you that poor weight gain doesn't always come along with feeding issues. If you have an oversupply or you have a strong letdown, your baby could still be gaining weight, like quote unquote normally, even though they have oral ties, for example, or they have feeding difficulties and their tongue is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So that is not a good indicator. And I know doctors are like, oh, it's okay, your baby's gaining weight, they're fine. And you're like, yeah, but they're still fussing and crying and spitting up and all the things. So some tips that you can do is obviously consult a lactation consultant, but also consultation with an occupational therapist or a speech language pathologist with feeding experience, pediatric dentist for an evaluation of oral ties. I want you to make sure though that these professionals do have additional training in tongue ties. Not all professionals do. This is not something that is taught in school. So it is really important for you to be asking those kinds of questions when you're looking for a provider to support you with things like reflux, oral ties, feeding issues, etc. You can also use elevated side-lying feeding to help with postural control, with milk flow, with tongue function, with overall comfort. Sometimes when we're feeding our baby in that cross cradle or that cradle position, too much pressure on the head and neck can actually cause them to have some body tightness and sort of push away because they're just uncomfortable. And then paced bottle feeding is another way to kind of help some of that milk flow and that ability to feed efficiently. The next one is reflux. And so reflux is more of a red flag. It's more of a symptom rather than a cause, but I put it here because it is a big one that I know that a lot of moms are dealing with. And so I did want to just touch on it more specifically than just saying like reflux. So what is reflux? Reflux is an involuntary regurgitation of stomach contents, including stomach acid. Some reflux may be normal in babies. There's a variety of reasons for that, but it's not normal if it is causing discomfort, if it's causing pain, if it's happening after every feed, if feeding is now difficult because your baby is constantly spitting up, if they are not gaining weight properly, all of that can be an indication that like we need to look at what is causing that reflux. Symptoms include frequent vomiting, discomfort during or after feeding, arching of the back during feeds, etc., etc. And there's like a whole long list of symptoms that I have inside that ebook. So just keep an eye out for that as well. And then these are some practical tips. These are, again, that elevated side lying position, especially if you're doing bottle feeding. This is a good and easy one to do. Offering more frequent feedings to reduce reflux symptoms. And then, of course, getting that oral motor assessment from an OT, SLP, or IBCLC. Silent reflux is another big one. Again, this is a symptom rather than a cause. Silent reflux is called laryngopharyngeal reflux. And this is when the stomach contents come up into the esophagus and the throat, but they're not actually vomited out. So they get they got brought up and then swallowed back down, and then brought up and swallowed back down. So you can imagine that this up and down actually causes quite a bit of irritation in the esophagus, but also in the throat area, which can lead to even more pain for our babies. So some of the signs of these might be frequent swallowing, coughing, gagging all the time, like during feeds, irritability after feeds, difficulty sleeping, especially when put on their back, and like a hoarse cry. Sometimes also their breath will smell kind of acidic or sour. So this is one of those times when actually reflux medication might be a good option in the short term. But again, we want to be looking for the cause while we're on that reflux medication. So again, very similar tips. Okay, so body tightness is the next root cause, and this can be caused by birth trauma or positioning. It can be caused by fast births or really long births, C-sections, vacuum extraction, forceps, even things like being induced with Pitocin, having an epidural. All of that stuff can lead to body tightness. And this body tightness can cause discomfort and obviously affect feeding, sleeping, overall regulation, fussiness, all of that. If your baby's not comfortable, they're going to let you know through crying. So symptoms, or some of the symptoms that could indicate there is some body tightness, include things like difficulty with tummy time, like they really don't like it or they can't seem to lift their head up. Maybe they have a preference to one side. If there's any stiffness in the neck or the body, if they're really tight and it's hard to get them dressed because they can't actually stretch their limbs out. If they have head shape issues like plagiocephaly, etc., etc. Again, I highly recommend body work for every single baby, at least 1 to 2 sessions. Also for moms, if you're able to do that, it is like magic. So either from a craniosacral therapist or an osteopath, an occupational therapist, or a physical therapist with additional training in craniosacral therapy or myofascial therapy, even a pediatric chiro. Also, you can do various gentle massage techniques to help with some of this muscle tension at home with your baby. And I do have a whole YouTube channel where I go through some of these things as well. So you're welcome to go and check that out for additional support on how you can start helping your baby at home for some body tightness exercises. Sensory processing is the next one, and was actually my passion even before I started working primarily with babies and toddlers. So I've been doing sensory processing stuff for probably like 16 years of my career. It's been a big passion of mine for sure, because it's like the foundation of our body. Everything that comes in through our environment is coming in through one of our senses. And so sensory processing issues can affect how your baby is responding to all of this sensory input that's coming in from the environment. So things like light, sound, touch, movement, body position changes, right? And this can all lead to nervous system regulation, difficulty calming down. Sometimes those fussy babies, they're overstimulated, they're sensitive to different senses and stimuli that are coming in. It can also lead to feeding problems and sleep disturbances. If we can't feel where our body is in space and we're just like not really sure what's going on and we're just getting bombarded by the sensory input that we can't filter properly, then it's going to be really hard to calm down and fall asleep, right? Symptoms can include things like sensitivity to light, to sound or touch, difficulty calming down, aversion to certain textures. There's like so many more. Sometimes it is even things like popping on and off the breast. There's just so many more symptoms that are all listed in the ebook as well. So again, you want to just be thinking about creating a calming environment at home, maybe dimming the lights, slowing your voice, soft sounds. You can incorporate different activities that your baby enjoys to help them kind of adjust to different stimuli. And this is what I often support a lot of my clients with, is really finding out what their baby's sensory preferences are and what kind of intentional activities we can put in place that will be calming for their bodies and soothing and help them to be able to regulate better as well. Okay, primitive reflexes is next. And this is also another one that I'm very passionate about because, again, this is like in the foundation of our body. But primitive reflexes are automatic movements that babies are born with, which typically integrate as they grow. What happens is when reflexes are not integrated, these can affect development. They can lead to changes or challenges in motor skills and behavior. Symptoms of this might be like persistent startle reflex or that Moro reflex, even after it should be integrated around like that 3 to 4 month mark. Poor coordination for our toddlers and older children, toe walking, difficulty with motor milestones, motion sickness, picky or messy eating, easily overwhelmed. Now, toe walking initially when they're first learning to sort of stand and walk, I don't really have any concerns about, but if your child has already been walking for a while and they're still toe walking, then that is definitely a sign that there's something else going on. So again, working with pediatric occupational therapists to integrate the reflexes. Sometimes chiropractors also have additional training to support reflexes, and then using specific exercises designed to help with that integration. But for babies, especially right now, what you can do as a preventative mechanism is really like lots and lots of floor play. That unrestricted movement, taking them through rolling, doing tummy time, encouraging them to crawl, all of that stuff is going to help to integrate those primitive reflexes as well. Okay. Temperament. This is another big one. So temperament refers to individual differences in emotional reactivity and self-regulation that are evident from early infancy. And it's important to understand your baby's temperament, which is kind of like their personality and their preferences, right? It can help you to really tailor their environment, your approach to them. It can reduce frustration for both of you. Symptoms of different kinds of temperament, obviously we're talking a little bit more about the high needs temperament here, because obviously if you have an easygoing baby, then you're not really worried. You're not looking for additional help and support. But high reactivity, difficulty calming down, need for constant holding or attention, going from 0 to 60, highly sensitive to their environment and the world. And so you might notice that some of these symptoms are similar to like the sensory processing symptoms and the primitive reflex symptoms. And there's also like vagal tone to consider. And so in my world and in my brain, all of these kind of are interrelated. And so when you affect change in one area, often you will see changes in another area as well. And although we cannot change temperament because there is a genetic component to it, we can support it and we can support our children. And if we can help with like the sensory processing differences, for example, or integrating those primitive reflexes or helping their nervous system by doing some body work and releasing some of that body tightness and tension, then sometimes their temperament can look different, right? We may have thought they had a high needs temperament, but in reality, it might have been all these other things, right? And so that's something that I help to kind of decipher through. So again, practical tips: observe and note your baby's pattern and reactions to different situations. Think about some of those sensory pieces, right? Because this is that high reactivity is often towards that input that's coming in through the environment, which is all coming in through our senses. Tune into how they react to different sensory stimuli, like I just mentioned. Provide consistent routines and calming environments to help regulate their nervous system, but also their emotions. Consistent routines is really key. When our brain knows what is coming next and when things become familiar and predictable, those are viewed as quote unquote safe by our primitive brain, versus when things are constantly changing, they're unpredictable, they're unfamiliar, I don't really know what's going on day to day, then our brain is viewing that as sort of scary and like something that we need to be on alert. Like, oh, I don't know this, I'm not used to this. Should I be on alert? Should I be worried? Is there a tiger around the corner? Basically is what our brain is thinking. Again, getting support from an occupational therapist, or sometimes physical therapists are also trained in sensory processing and primitive reflexes as well. Nutritional imbalances is another big one. And this is one that often also gets missed quite a bit, that doctors are not really looking at, which is like mind-boggling to me, because they're there to help you with your health, but actually what they're there for is to rule out pathology. And they do a good job with that. And I just wish that doctors in general would know when to say, actually, I think you should go and see a naturopath if you suspect that there's nutritional imbalances, rather than saying, no, everything's fine, let's just wait and see how everything goes, or your baby will outgrow it, or like there's no such thing as low iron, or whatever it is that they say, right? I hear all sorts of crazy things from moms, and I've experienced them too. So nutritional imbalances occur. Specifically, I've noticed that things like iron, magnesium, zinc, and vitamin D, if those are low, they can really affect things like growth, development, sleep, irritability, developmental delays. This is also something to potentially look at. And the important part to know, especially with iron, is that if you were low in iron before or during pregnancy, then most likely your baby is also low in iron. And low iron is a big one when it comes to restless sleep, moving around a lot at sleep, not being able to settle without some really big body contact from mom or primary caregiver. Symptoms of nutritional imbalances can include things like poor appetite, picky eating, slow growth, irritability, ear infections, and just frequent colds and things like that, restless sleep, and also sleep disturbances. Again, if you are breastfeeding, you're going to want to make sure that you're eating a well-balanced diet that has all these vitamins in it. You want to think about supplementing with vitamin D if you're not already doing so, including iron-rich foods in your own diet, but also in your baby's diet once they start solids. If you suspect a deficiency or you just want to get it checked out, it's hard to do blood work on babies and toddlers, obviously. They have very small hands and arms and veins. But sometimes you can just get yourself checked out, especially if you suspect that maybe you have low iron or you want to just make sure that your iron levels are even like normal. And I would actually have a naturopath read the results because they view low and quote unquote deficient levels differently than a doctor would. Because remember, the doctor's looking for pathology. The doctor's looking for anemia, not just low iron. And low iron itself, which is higher levels than anemia, can lead to these sleep difficulties. So I would definitely recommend getting naturopath support for those. Okay, let's take a breath because I feel like I just rushed through all of that because I just want to be mindful of time and I want to have time to answer your questions. So how do you feel? Have you started to have a bit more of an understanding of what might be going on with your baby? Perhaps you're feeling the weight and the worry and the overwhelm lifting just a little bit. Has the pressure lifted? Are you starting to see the glimmer of kind of light at the end of this long tunnel that you've been on and this path and this journey that you've been on trying to figure out your baby? Maybe you have a little bit more hope that you actually can find the answers of what is going on with your baby. Maybe you have some more confidence and courage now in motherhood to kind of look for more of these answers. So if you have been following along and being like, okay, yeah, this makes some sense. I really want to dive more into like what these specific red flags are for each of the root causes to really support my baby and figure out who to go for what. This is exactly what I do with my clients. And I've created an ebook with all of these signs and symptoms and red flags in checklists by the root causes. So it's called What's Wrong with My Baby? And it's a valuable tool that complements this free workshop and the things that we've started discussing today. And then if you have found this workshop to be eye-opening and like someone may actually finally understand and be able to help you figure out how to best support your baby, then I am here for you on a whole new level. I have recently started a new way to kind of work with me, which encompasses access to all of my baby courses and ebooks on various topics from holistic sleep to development to primitive reflexes, tongue ties, and even weaning, along with more support for you as a mama to build your trust in yourself, to help you tune into your instincts and really find that confidence that you have been dreaming of. So in this program, we get curious about ourselves, we get curious about our parenting values, we get curious about our instincts, we get curious about our babies. We also gain clarity on what is normal and typical for babies around sleep, development, reflux, all of the things that we just discussed. But then we also look at red flags and how to really support those root causes. And then when you finally understand your baby and what may be going on with them, then that's when you can become more confident and courageous to kind of go against the grain and do things your way, right? You have more confidence that you know that you're doing the right thing for your baby. So what does this program involve? So it includes access to all my courses and ebooks, like I mentioned. You can go through those in a self-paced way. Then also you have one-to-one access with me every month with a one-to-one call, as well as 60 minutes of texting and or voice note support per month. So it's really like having a baby therapist in your back pocket. So if you're up at 3 a.m. feeding your baby and you have a question about something, instead of going down the Google rabbit hole, because I have totally been there, trust me, it is not fun, you can just text me or voice note me instead. Now, I'm not going to answer at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I will respond the next morning when I wake up. And you can rest assured that my response will be evidence-informed, developmentally appropriate, and it's not going to take you down a whole Google rabbit hole. This program also includes guest expert interviews to further support your concerns, group coaching calls to ask me questions, but also connect and hear from other moms so that you don't feel like you're doing this alone. This program is a 3-month commitment with various payment plan options available. And then after that, you can decide to continue on a month-by-month basis if you still feel like you need additional support, additional coaching, etc. So here's Megan. She had a few little words to say about mothering from within. She felt so lost, confused, and overwhelmed. She was pretty much winging it and feeling kind of unsure about everything related to babies. She was stressed about sleep, why her baby wasn't sleeping like she thought they should be, worrying about all the fussing and crying. Feeding was really hard. And she didn't really know what toys she should be buying, how to constantly entertain her baby. She was scrolling on Instagram and Googling all the things, and she was just so confused about all the do's and don'ts, and everyone seemed to be saying something different. And she was comparing herself and her baby to everyone else, and that just led to more stress. And so after going through this program, she found her voice as a mama, really felt like the support was compassionate, and getting baby expert advice on baby-related things was a godsend. So she really left with a lot more confidence and clarity. You're here because you want the best for your baby, and you want the confidence and the support to trust your instincts. You have an idea of what motherhood was going to be like, and you just need a few reminders and a little bit of help to reach that dream of having this baby who you can enjoy, who you can spend the days with, who you're not constantly trying to figure out and sort of survive with, right? You want to make sure that you're supporting your baby's development appropriately with the right stimulation. You want things to be a little bit less stressful, feeding to be a little bit easier, tummy time to not be a crying fit. And let's be honest, you're exhausted. You want to do motherhood your way, courageously following your own path, one that aligns with your parenting and family values, one that doesn't leave you second guessing whether you're doing things wrong or that you're somehow failing at this role of motherhood. Imagine how good life can get if you have a baby therapist in your back pocket, an expert at your fingertips, your personal coach and cheerleader who will encourage you to find and trust your mama instincts, who will help you figure out what is going on with your baby and the next best steps. Someone to text your questions to in the middle of the night, someone to run your worries by, someone who won't dismiss you, but will look at the whole picture. This program, Mothering from Within, is like your virtual village of support, and I've got you. And together we'll rock your motherhood journey. And I'm here to hold your hand every step of the way. So here is how you can join the program. I will send those links out as well. If you're not quite sure whether this program is for you, you have some more questions, you want to just chat things out about your specific situation, I do offer complimentary 20 to 30 minute Right Fit calls to go through some of your questions and concerns and to really dive deep into whether this program is the right fit for you. So feel free to book that in. Thank you so much for joining me for this Baby Red Flags and Root Causes workshop. We learned a lot about red flags and their root causes to sort of better help you understand your baby. I also gave you some practical tips and next steps for various root causes, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here with me on this call and to just understand your baby a little bit more. So here's to Mothering from Within, and may you find the courage inside to do it your way.